Imagine standing on the shore, watching a colossal container ship glide out of the harbor. Its deck is stacked with steel containers towering as high as a 9-story building. The total weight of the cargo exceeds 100,000 tons. The ship's hull is forged from steel, its engines, anchors, chains, and bulkheads, all steel. Together, they weigh far more than water. Steel sinks. Every child knows this. Toss a steel bolt into a bucket, and it plunges straight to the bottom. Yet here we have this behemoth of 200,000 tons of steel, fuel, and cargo, not just floating, but traversing the vast Pacific Ocean. Through storms, with waves reaching 12 meters high and the ship tilting at 30 degrees. It doesn't capsize, it doesn't sink. Here's what most people don't grasp. A ship doesn't just float because it's hollow inside. That's like saying a plane flies because it has wings. Technically true, but practically useless. The real question isn't why the ship doesn't sink in calm waters, but why it doesn't capsize in a storm. Why doesn't a 30-meter-high stack of containers topple it like dominoes? Why can a ship, even when breached and taking on thousands of tons of water, still stay afloat? The answer isn't a single formula or principle. It's a meticulously calculated balance between gravity, buoyant force, hull geometry, and mass distribution. A balance where the safe margin is measured in mere centimeters and degrees. Shift even slightly off course, and 200,000 tons of steel could overturn and sink in minutes. Today, we're diving into the hidden physics that keep a ship afloat and prevent it from capsizing. And I promise, after this exploration, you'll never look at a passing vessel the same way again. Let's start with the basics. Why doesn't a steel ship sink at all? Archimedes' principle. A body immersed in a fluid is buoyed up by a force equal to the weight of the fluid displaced. This is taught in middle school, but few ponder its true implications for a ship. A steel sheet sinks because its density is greater than water's. But that same steel sheet, shaped into a box, displaces a vast volume of water with relatively little mass. The empty space inside the hull isn't nothing. It's air, which is 800 times less dense than water. A ship is essentially a steel shell filled with air. The average density of this structure, hull plus air plus cargo, must be less than that of water. Then, the buoyant force exceeds the weight, and the ship rises until these forces balance. The equilibrium point determines the draft, the depth to which the ship is submerged. Heavier cargo means a deeper draft. The more hull volume below the waterline, the more water is displaced, creating a greater buoyant force. As long as there's reserve volume in the hull, the ship floats. If the weight exceeds the maximum buoyant force, the ship will sink. That's why every ship has a load line, the plimsoll line, indicating the maximum safe draft. Load the ship below this line, and the reserve buoyancy becomes dangerously low. But buoyancy is only half the story, and frankly, not the most intriguing half. Because a ship that floats but capsizes is no better than one that sinks. The real question is stability. The ability of a ship to return to an upright position after being tilted by an external force, wave, wind, or shifting cargo. This is where the physics that determine whether a ship survives or perishes come into play. Every ship has two critical points. The first is the center of gravity, marked as G. This is the point where the ship's entire weight is concentrated. It depends on how the mass is distributed, where the engines are, where the cargo lies, where the fuel tanks are, and where the superstructures are located. The center of gravity always pulls the ship downward. The second point is the center of buoyancy, denoted by the letter B. This is the geometric center of the submerged part of the hull, the portion below the waterline that displaces water. The buoyant force, or Archimedes' force, is applied precisely at this point, always directed upwards. When a ship is perfectly upright, both points, G, center of gravity, and B, center of buoyancy, align on a single vertical line. The weight of the ship presses down through G, while the buoyant force pushes up through B. These forces are equal and opposite. Equilibrium. But imagine a wave tilting the ship a few degrees to the right. What happens then? The shape of the submerged hull changes. The starboard side sinks deeper, while the port side rises. The volume of displaced water remains constant. The ship's weight hasn't changed. However, the geometry of this volume has shifted. The center of buoyancy, B, moves to the right, towards the more submerged side. Meanwhile, the center of gravity, G, remains nearly stationary. The ship's mass hasn't moved. Now the ship's weight presses down through G, and the buoyant force pushes up through B. But B is no longer beneath G. It has shifted to the right. These two forces, weight and buoyancy, create a couple, a rotational force. The direction of this moment decides everything. If the moment returns the ship to its upright position, the ship is stable. It will sway and straighten. If the moment pushes the ship further into the tilt, the ship is unstable. It will capsize. To determine what will happen, engineers introduce another point, the metacenter, denoted by M. This is the intersection of the vertical line passing through the shifted center of buoyancy B with the ship's central axis. It's a geometric concept, but its physical significance is a matter of life and death. If the metacenter M is above the center of gravity G, the ship is stable. The distance Gm is called the metacentric height. The greater it is, the stronger the righting moment, and the more stable the ship. If the metacenter is below the center of gravity, it's over. Any deviation from the vertical intensifies. The ship capsizes. Metacentric height, Gm, two symbols, and within them lies the difference between a safe voyage and disaster. For a large container ship, a typical metacentric height ranges from 1.5 to 2.5 meters. For a cruise liner, it's between 1 and 2 meters. For a tanker, it varies from 2 to 5 meters, depending on the load. It may seem modest, but this isn't a margin of safety left for aesthetics. It's a precisely calculated value, and it too is a compromise. But here's the obvious question. If a larger metacentric height means greater stability, why not make it as large as possible? Lower the center of gravity as much as possible. Place all heavy cargo at the bottom. Fill the ballast tanks. Create a ship that cannot be overturned. And this is where physics starts to push back. An excessively large metacentric height means an overly strong righting moment. A ship that snaps back upright instantly after every tilt doesn't sway gently but jerks, like a metronome. A short roll period, high angular accelerations. Cargo experiences immense dynamic loads. Containers break free from their lashings. Lashing rods snap. A stack of containers 20 meters high begins to sway, deform, and at some point, the top containers fly overboard. The crew can't stand upright. Equipment on the bridge, devices, monitors, coffee cups, flies around the room. This is no exaggeration. Violent rolling is one of the most serious operational issues for cargo ships. Container loss at sea occurs regularly. Hundreds and thousands of containers are lost overboard annually, and a significant portion of these losses is due to parametric resonance and excessively harsh rolling. Too small a metacentric height, and the ship becomes tender. It tilts slowly, returns reluctantly, and any additional force, a gust of wind, a shift in cargo, a wave's turn, might be the final push that sends it past the point of no return. Capsizing. Ideal stability in a ship is not about achieving the maximum or minimum. It's about navigating a narrow corridor where the vessel remains stable enough not to capsize, yet gentle enough to avoid damaging the cargo or tossing the crew from their bunks. However, metacentric height only measures stability at small angles of heel, 5, 10, maybe 15 degrees. But what happens when those angles increase? Enter the more complex tool, the static stability curve, or GZ curve. This graph illustrates how the righting moment changes as the angle of heel increases. At small angles, the moment grows stronger, with the ship resisting more forcefully. It peaks, then begins to decline, eventually reaching zero. This critical point is known as the angle of vanishing stability. Beyond this angle, the moment turns negative, and the ship no longer rights itself. It capsizes. For most commercial vessels, the angle of vanishing stability ranges from 50 to 70 degrees. That might sound substantial, but in a raging ocean storm, where waves exert dynamic forces and water on deck adds thousands of tons of weight high above the waterline, the actual margin can be far less forgiving. There's a term every marine engineer knows and every captain dreads: free surface effect. Imagine a tank half filled with fuel. As the ship heels, the liquid shifts to the lower side. The mass moves with the heel, raising the ship's center of gravity. The metacentric height decreases and stability drops. This isn't a theoretical abstraction, it's a leading cause of ship disasters. A tanker carrying liquid cargo in partially filled tanks can lose stability simply due to the liquid sloshing inside. That's why cargo tanks are designed to be narrow, divided by longitudinal bulkheads, and filled either completely or left empty. Partial filling is a danger zone. The fishing vessel West capsized and sank in the Pacific Ocean in 2004. Among the causes was the free surface effect in the fish holds. The catch wasn't properly secured, and as the ship rolled, the fish and water shifted from side to side, increasing the roll until the vessel overturned. 6 of the 8 crew members perished. Free surface effect. 3 words. And behind them lie hundreds of lost sailors and dozens of sunken ships. Another critical scenario is compartment flooding. A breach, collision, or grounding can let water rush into the hull. Here, the last line of defense kicks in: watertight bulkheads. The ship's hull is divided by transverse steel walls into compartments, each sealed off. If one floods, the water doesn't spread to the others. The number of compartments a ship can lose and still remain afloat is known as the index of subdivision. History's lessons were written in blood. After the Titanic sank in 1912, taking 1,500 lives with it in just over 2 hours, the standards for compartmentalization were tightened. Each subsequent disaster, like the Andrea Doria in 1956 and the Estonia in 1994, prompted further revisions. Modern cruise ships must stay afloat and stable even when several adjacent compartments are flooded. This is calculated across thousands of scenarios, different combinations of flooded compartments, varying loads and sea conditions. Yet bulkheads are a compromise. More bulkheads mean more safety, but less usable space inside the hull. Each bulkhead is tons of steel that take up room in cargo holds or passenger areas. Each one is an obstacle for loading and unloading, for running pipelines and cables, for crew movement. A tanker with 10 longitudinal bulkheads is safer than one with 3, but loading and unloading it is a logistical nightmare. Therefore, the number of bulkheads isn't a matter of the more the better. It's a precise balance between safety, economics, and operational efficiency. Let's circle back to where we began. Picture a 400-meter-long container ship with cargo towering 30 meters above the deck, braving the ocean amidst a winter storm. Now you perceive it differently. It's not just a big ship. It's a complex system where every parameter – draft, beam, freeboard height, ballast weight, number of bulkheads, roll period – exists at the intersection of conflicting demands. The metacentric height isn't at its maximum or minimum. It's precisely calibrated to prevent capsizing in a storm, while ensuring the cargo isn't tossed overboard by violent rolling. The draft is just right to maintain buoyancy with a full load and withstand stormy conditions, yet not so deep that the ship can't enter port. Bulkheads are designed to withstand calculated flooding, but not so numerous that the ship becomes an impractical steel labyrinth. This isn't about sailing with maximum stability. It's about navigating a narrow corridor between capsizing and cargo damage, between buoyancy and draft, between unsinkability and economic viability. Every centimeter of metacentric height, every ton of ballast, every bulkhead is meticulously placed. Within this corridor lie hidden advantages that passengers and shippers rarely consider. Ballast tanks, which fill with water when the ship is empty, not only stabilize the vessel, but also position the propeller at an optimal depth, enhancing efficiency and saving fuel. Bilge keels, narrow steel fins on the hull, don't generate additional lift but dampen rolling, reducing angular accelerations and protecting the cargo. Anti-roll tanks, where water shifts from side to side with a controlled delay, transform the free surface, a traditional enemy of stability, into an ally that dampens rolling. This, I believe, is where the true beauty of marine engineering lies. A ship isn't merely an object that floats, it's an ongoing negotiation with the physics of water, with gravity pulling down, with buoyant force pushing up, with waves attempting to capsize, with cargo eager to shift, with water seeking any crevice to breach. Every vessel that departs a port is a response to all these forces simultaneously. Not perfect, not maximal, but the only feasible solution at the point where all constraints converge. When you see a container ship in a stormy ocean, you're witnessing not a crude mass of steel, but a precise balance maintained by centimeters and degrees. And here's what makes me ponder. We've discussed how a ship resists capsizing, but we haven't touched on what happens when this balance is suddenly disrupted, when a rogue wave, towering 25 meters high, crashes onto a vessel designed for 12-meter waves. How exactly do extreme waves break the calculated model, and why do ocean-going ships continue to vanish without a trace in the 21st century? I've created a separate video delving into this in detail. You can find it on the channel.